Dear all, may I request you to come inside the venue. We'll start the event shortly. Sorry. Hello. Distinguished keynote speakers, Professor Thea Hillhorst, President IHSA, Professor 𝐂𝐚𝐧𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐫𝐢𝐚, Arkan, Deputy Director of ICAD, Moderator of the session, Professor Tawfiq M. Haq, distinguished presenters, our colleagues at NSU and IHSA, good morning. I am Bulbul Siddiqui, an Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science and Sociology, and a member of the Center for Peace Studies, SIPG, at North-South University. I'm also serving as the Director of Confucius Institute at North-South University. This is a timely conference on humanitarian issues in the present time. We are passing a difficult time when people around the world are facing various humanitarian crises. The ongoing Rohingya crisis, Russia-Ukraine war, crisis in Gaza are some of them, and there are many other humanitarian crises ongoing. The 7th International Humanitarian Studies Association Conference at NSU will enable a scope for critical discussion engaging academics, students, and practitioners from across the globe. The main theme of the conference this year is humanitarianism in changing climates, with 6 sub-themes that you already know. We are very excited to welcome you all to this international seminar at North-South University. This is the first time that International Humanitarian Studies Association is hosting its annual conference outside, in Asia, and the first time in Bangladesh. And as you know that IHSA is a global platform for humanitarian actors from different countries. I would like to express my gratitude to IHSA leadership to decide to come to Bangladesh at NSU. On the other hand, North-South University is a leading educational institute at Bangladesh with nearly 25,000 students, where CPS, Center for Peace Studies at SIPG, has been organizing international seminars and webinars since its inception. I would also like to acknowledge the contribution of Insights, who is the associate partner of the conference. I would like to thank distinguished presenters who traveled from various countries despite the nationwide strike and blockade in Bangladesh. At some point of time, we are also very worried about if we could hold it in person or need to shift it entirely online. We could hold it in a hybrid mode because of your willingness to participate in person. I would like to thank you again. The authority of North-South University has supported the conference with its highest priority. To make all the sessions seamless, a dedicated team from IT, CPS, SIPG, and the student volunteers from ES and EF are giving full support. Despite all these supports, if any difficulties and challenges arise, we hope to resolve it as soon as possible. We'd also expect that you would consider it sympathetically. With this short note, I welcome you again to this international conference. Now I would like to invite Professor Sheikh 𝐶𝐿𝐻𝐿, who is the Director of Center for Peace Studies, SIPG. Professor 𝐶𝐿𝐻𝐿 is a Professor of Public Policy and Governance and the Director of South Asian Institute of Policy Governance at North-South University. He is also working as the Chair of the Department of Political Science and Sociology at North-South University. His area of research interest covers migration and refugee crisis, climate change, geopolitics, South Asian studies, and development management. He has published 7 books, 13 book chapters, and several scientific research papers. His latest edited volume, titled The Displaced Rohingyas, A Tale of Vulnerable Community, was published by Routledge in August this year. He has 28 years of wide-ranging experience in managing development and education projects. Please welcome Professor 𝐶𝐿𝐻𝐿. Before I pass it to him, just one announcement. We'll be distributing the badges for participants right after the photo session, after this session. Thank you. Professor 𝐶𝐿𝐻𝐿.
Thank you, Dr. Bulbul. Assalamu alaikum and very good morning, everyone. Shobaike shubho shakal ebong Bangladeshe obhinandan. It's great to have you all in today's inaugural ceremony of the 7th IHSA International Conference on Humanitarianism in Changing Climates. I warmly welcome keynote speaker of this international conference, Professor Dorothy Hillhurst, the President of IHSA, and Professor Mizan R. Khan, Deputy Director of International Center for Climate Change and Development, and a former faculty member of North-South University at the Environmental Studies Department and good friend of all of us. We are extremely sad by the passing of Professor 𝐶𝐿𝐻𝐿, who was one of our keynote speakers. I am sure Professor Khan will reflect briefly on his contribution in the field of humanitarian assistance during his speech. Before I just give a little bit introduction about North-South University and SIPG and Center for Peace Studies, I'd also like to give you a big thanks because you decided, especially our international participants, to travel to Bangladesh with the newses that you were getting. I'm sure many of you traveled Bangladesh before or part of South Asia, so you are used to with this kind of uncertainty. And that's the spirit of practitioners and academics of humanitarian assistance, that this political turmoil did not stop you to attend these academic and practitioners' exercises. So I must commend your courage and motivation and spirit to be here physically. And with that, I'm also a little bit shy to let you know that the participation from Bangladesh and North-South University might be a little bit low because of this nationwide blockade that has been started from this morning. And another problem that we are facing is that this is the last week of our semesters. all the classes has been cancelled physically, so faculties are awfully busy for taking the last minute online classes. So today and tomorrow is the last day of the semester, unfortunately. So that's why probably you will be finding that a little bit less number of participants today, tomorrow, but we are hoping that Bangladeshi, especially NSU participants, will be there on 7th. With that note, I would like to give you a little bit introduction about North-South University. For probably many of you, this is the first time that you are visiting here. North-South University is the first private university in Bangladesh, was established in 1993. Relatively, it's a young university. But we are now the topmost private university, and also according to the Times Higher Education Ranking 2023, North-South and Dhaka University is the topmost university in Bangladesh among all public and private universities. We have 4 schools. One school under which we are working, there's the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. We have a School of Engineering and Physical Sciences, and then a School of Business and Economics, and also a School of Health and Life Sciences. Among all these schools, the faculty members are heavily engaged with the research activities in relation to humanitarian assistance. I will not take much time to give you all those details, but I can tell you that we have a multidisciplinary approach in the faculty level, where our faculty members from different schools, departments, they are working. Especially in last 6-7 years after the Rohingya crisis, lots of interdisciplinary research has been done among the faculty members of different schools. NSU also is quite vibrant in terms of its student engagement. Unfortunately, again, you are not seeing any students in the campus today, and will not be seeing also tomorrow and after tomorrow because of these online classes. But we have 24,000 students in this campus, and you can just think about how vibrant the campus is when all the students are roaming around. Unfortunately, that also will be missing. Our students also having lots of activities related to humanitarian assistance, especially they have working with the social activity kind of the clubs and other kind of the activities. Let us very briefly also tell you about SIPG. South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance is only one in Bangladesh working in the policy and governance at the regional level, and it was established in 2008. We have 2 master's programs, one international master's in public policy and governance, where the civil servants of Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan come and study. And we have a very interesting course curriculum which covers development management, climate change, crisis management, peace and development, and this kind of the things. We have another regular kind of executive master's on policy and governance also. SIPG is engaged with so many research works for last 15-16 years, especially at the regional level, to understand starting from refugee to climate change to other kind of the crises. I'm so happy that IHSA decided to hold this conference in Dhaka and also in Bangladesh, because it's so important that for Bangladesh also, because we have a huge, long experience of humanitarian assistance, starting from our independence in 1971. And if you look into the Bangladesh's track record and also the trajectory in disaster management, whether flood or cyclone, or tackling the climate change issues as a 6th largest climate vulnerable country in the world, or refugee management that we are recently seeing both in Rohingya refugees and climate refugees. So Bangladesh is a hub of NGOs, civil society organizations, practitioners. I'm sure all of you are aware about it. And NSU also has a very close relationship with NGO activities. We have formal MUs with 70 local NGOs in Bangladesh, with whom we are very closely working, especially in this case of the service delivery and humanitarian assistance, and also our students get a chance to go and do interning in those institutes. Little bit idea about Center for Peace Studies. It's a relatively new center established in 2019, when we hold the largest international conference on Rohingya issue in this campus. And after that, we started doing lots of research related to Rohingya under Center for Peace Studies, but also we covered regional peace and conflict-related issues like Afghan crisis, Sri Lankan economic crisis, Nepal issues, and other kind of the thing. So again, Center for Peace Studies is also an interdisciplinary center which aims to facilitate the academic study of peace building and promotion of resilient society through evidence-based and empirical research at North-South University. With that brief introduction, I would now just I will be moderating this session, so let you know a little bit about the formats that we will be following. We have two keynote speakers. They will be getting 20 minutes time to give their presentation. And by the way, we are also in live so that people also can see virtually. And after the keynote speech, then we have kind of some practical information will be given by our IHSA representative. And then we will conclude with some formalities. And after that, we will go to the downstairs for a formal photo session with probably some coffee and some snacks before going to the parallel sessions which will be starting from 11 o'clock. So now I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Professor Dorothy Hillhurst, President of IHSA, to deliver her keynote speech on the field of humanitarian studies. Before that, let me also introduce her with a short bio. Dorothy is a professor of humanitarian studies at the International Institute of Social Studies of Erasmus University in The Hague, and was one of the founders of the International Humanitarian Studies Association in 2009. Her research focus is on aid society relations, studying how aid is embedded in the context, impacts on governments and society, and is shaped by the manifold actions of actors in and around programs for protection, service delivery, and capacity development. She has a special interest in the intersections of humanitarianism with development, peace building, and gender relations. With teams of researchers and PhD candidates, she studies humanitarian governance in Ethiopia, DRC, Colombia, and elsewhere. So, Dorothy, please come. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Oops. I can't tell you how pleased I am to see all of you here. It's for me very special that we are here in Bangladesh. And for me, Bangladesh is the place where you might say disaster risk reduction was almost invented. If you look at the history of Bangladesh on how it dealt with the cyclones, the immense death toll they took in the 1970s up until the 1990s, and then the huge mobilization from the government, from international actors, from local actors, with very low-level technologies, people going around in villages on their bicycle, with the amplifying their voices, like people, there will be a storm coming, you have to evacuate, all the training that was done. And then I think Bangladesh can boast that it was actually able to showcase to the world how you can deal with that issue. Of course, there's now many other issues coming up. And so it's one of the most appropriate places, I think, to have our conference. I was just thinking, Tawfiq, when you were talking about the Bangladeshi participation, I'm sure there will be many people online. But it's in a way illustrative of an issue that we are talking about a lot today, which is localization, and how this conference maybe shows that sometimes for international people the risks involved in going to places can be less than the risks involved for people who are from the country. So now we are here with a large group of people who come from international places, whereas the people from Bangladesh cannot reach this site because of the blockages. So that is a very ironic illustration of one of the issues we talk about a lot. I'm super pleased that we can organize this conference with you, with North-South University. We've had a very wonderful collaboration, and that's really great. So as a very small token of our appreciation, allow me, Mr. Tawfiq, to just give you a tiny little something that we brought for you from the Netherlands.
Thank you very much.
No, it has been really, really grand. Before I move to my actual keynote, I would like to also briefly say that I've been extremely sad to hear that 𝐶𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐫𝐢𝐚 died, unfortunately, totally unexpectedly. He's one of those people that somehow you cannot even anticipate that a world without him. It's like he's such an institute. You somehow, you know everybody is mortal, but you somehow feel like somebody will be there forever because of the influence, because of the importance, because of the consistent. You will talk about it much more in detail. But he was, for me, the first and the most persistent and consistent person who warned us, like, climate change is not just about mitigation. It's already happening. Vulnerable people are suffering and we need adaptation. And that is, for me, where 𝐶𝐢𝐭𝐚𝐫𝐢𝐚 was really a very grand person in teaching that lesson to all of us, ahead of all of us. But we will hear from you more about him, but I just wanted to also say, on a personal note, how very sad I am about this, that he died. And I was so much looking forward to see him here. He was going to be one of our keynotes. But that's just what happens. Let me start my keynote. For those of you, I'm at the moment the president of the International Humanitarian Studies Association. So I've been around quite a bit, observing what has been going on in our field. And I thought for today, like, how to characterize it. I thought, well, what is capturing a lot of what we are doing is that we are having a shift now from humanitarianism to humanitarianisms. And that has been a profound shift that we've been seeing at different levels. So one of those is, and that has been around for some time, for as long as I remember, people were reminding us, like, hey, wait a minute. The Western values, the Western principles are not the only source of humanitarianism. We've seen other sources. I was just reading again a PhD from an African scholar who was reminding us about the importance of Ubuntu as an organizing principle of solidarity and lateral aid in communities in many parts of Africa. But also, of course, the Zakat system has very often been labeled as one of the examples of how there are different histories of humanitarianism coexisting and perhaps needing more attention. What we also now see is a multiplicity of the ethics of humanitarianism. So there is, of course, we all grew up learning about the nudantist humanitarianism with the principles, humanity, independence, neutrality, impartiality. All of us can dream those principles. But lately we see increasingly that we see perhaps not challenges, but perhaps it's expansions, or perhaps it is alternatives, where people feel more at ease or more comfortable or organize around different sets of principles that are, in a way, very, you wonder, like, what's really the difference or not? That's a field of study. But for example, there is, with the rise of more development-oriented agencies in humanitarianism, I think we also have what you might even call an accountability participation-oriented set of principles that really foregrounds the importance of ownership by communities that are affected by crisis, as almost as a principle of its own, as an organizing high-level principle of its own. We now see the advent of feminist humanitarianism, which is very much talking about the ethics of care, which is also a very interesting concept, where you think, how is the ethics of care different from humanity? Or maybe it doesn't need to be different from the principle of humanity, but it is a set of ethics that speaks to people today, and it speaks to people who galvanize around it and identify with it. And we will, actually there's quite some panels about it in this conference too. Further, I wanted to mention the rights-based approaches and more solidarity-oriented approaches that are we also see in humanitarianism. And for example, it was very strong with the reception of people in Lesbos, where the humanitarians there took a real distance from the established humanitarian actors, and they called themselves the Solidarians. And they kind of felt like the big humanitarian agencies, they have become too bureaucratized, and there's too much distance from the people they serve. So we are Solidarians, we stand by people. We don't stand above them, but we stand by them. Another component or aspect or theme I see emerging in the transition from humanitarianism to humanitarianisms would be making the invisible visible. And there's a lot of work coming up. Again, we will see it in this conference. There are panels about it, roundtables, about how actors that were until now slightly invisible because there was too much focus on the international humanitarian system are actually doing perhaps most of the humanitarian work or a lot of humanitarian work on the ground. So just yesterday I heard that apparently the diaspora contributions to Somalia are much bigger. Mohammed, where are you? I found by what you told us that it's the case. So this you said, I think, that the diaspora contributions are bigger than humanitarian and development added up together. So that might be the major source of assistance in Somalia since quite some time. But also what we call now civic humanitarianism. Other people, it goes by many names. Other people talk about everyday humanitarianism. There's also relational humanitarianism, several other concepts that all seem to have come to that same idea, like why don't we put much more focus on what is actually happening outside of the official organizational structures, but nonetheless semi-organized, informally organized forms of solidarity, social safety nets, and mutual assistance. So all those are, I think, themes that point to this moving from humanitarianism to humanitarianisms. Now, in my own research, I also made that same claim, like we have to shift away from humanitarianism to humanitarianism, in the plural, with yet another angle that you can take on this. And the angle that we have taken in our research is we look at humanitarian governance. Now, humanitarian governance could be defined as the attempt to govern individuals and collectivities in the name of preserving life and resolve human suffering, in particular in humanitarian crisis. But what is important to the story that we are doing, the research that we are doing in my institute or the institute where I work, the Institute of Social Studies, is that it is an interplay of government, national actors and international actors. So whereas until relatively recently, we would, if we talked about humanitarianism, there was this organogram sort of pointing out we have, the UN, we have ICRC, we have IFRC, we have the big NGOs like MSF, like, the big ones, CARE, Oxfam, and that was basically the organogram. Or, if you were lucky, there was one box below saying the local. But the local, of course, that would be the government, that would be local communities, affected communities, it would be NGOs. Very often the military play a large role in humanitarian action as well on the ground. So humanitarianism, as I've defined it previously, it's like an arena where very many different groups come together in coordinated, competing, working alongside each other or with each other. But it's an arena that we have to study. How does humanitarianism actually evolve in situ as an emerging outcome, not like the organogram that we like to draw. Now, if we take this seriously, it means that context matters. That where humanitarian action is happening, it happens in a context and the context matters. So in our research, we use the idea of scenarios, where we actually deliberately choose a few cases on the basis of some properties that are very different when it comes to governance. The properties would go around the type of government in place, and to some extent also the socio-economic indicators, because it matters for what can be done, what cannot be done. So in our particular, my research program that I'm now having, and by the way, many of the colleagues are here, that you will hear a lot about us from different panels, etc., etc. But what we have 3 countries, which is DRC, Ethiopia, and Colombia. Now, these countries were chosen as a standing for one of the scenarios that I just tried to describe. So that would be, if you take DRC, on the Human Development Index, it's a very low number. I mean, we all know it's very poor. It is been conflict-ridden for quite a long time now. And there's the saying that the government is very weak in DRC, not functioning very well. Now, if you're there, you start to feel like, to some extent, it is functioning. Is it not functioning? I will not go with the people who say there is no government in DRC that is functioning, but there is strong weakness in the government in DRC. So that gives very different conditions for humanitarian action from the situation in Ethiopia, which is equally ranking on the Human Development Index. So it's also people in Ethiopia are perhaps equally poor, almost equally poor as in DRC, but in a very different governance structure, where Ethiopia is a very strong government. Some people would say it's leaning toward more authoritarian features. So the government tries to take control at every moment of humanitarian action. It's a very different type of conditions, and humanitarianism starts to look different in different places. Colombia, finally, would be for us, it's of course conflict-ridden. It also has many disasters, so it's in that sense a real humanitarian space, but one that has, which is a middle-income country, and institutionally very well developed, both in terms of the government, but also other institutions and NGOs, and a long history of NGOs that are very critical and really seek to always expand their civic space. So those 3 countries are standing for different scenarios. Now, what is the main premise of our research, or what is the main idea also of my speech here, is that the politics in those areas are contextual, so we really see different things. And this is not just good news. Very often it is not. And I cannot stand here in front of you and not pay attention to some of the current issues that we are having. And one of them, of course, Gaza, where we see that so many people are now talking about the double standards of established institutions, established Western governments, for example, but also some of the UN institutions in having for like a very strong focus on international humanitarian law when it comes to Ukraine, but not having that same focus on international humanitarian law when it comes to the retaliation, that the brutal retaliation that is now happening and that we see happening in Gaza in response to the violence that happened in Israel. And so there's lots of things to do about it. We will also have a roundtable about this issue in our conference for those of you who like to speak more about it, because it's on everybody's mind. But also I wanted to mention another situation that I'm now trying to follow closely in the region, in Pakistan, where the government has issued that people from Afghanistan have to actually return to their country, more or less overnight. And it's really not just one of those rhetorical things, you know, that people would say at a moment of elections, for example, but it's a well-prepared operation and people are being rounded up, put in camps to be deported. What is the role of UNHCR in this? How come that UNHCR has ended up in a position where they have registered Afghans, whereas those informations are with the government? So what the government needs to do is simply take the list of UNHCR and they can find all the houses where Afghans are to pick them up. So there's lots of things to say about it, and for people who know me, I'm never outrightly super critical, because there are stories behind everything. There's also a story, I'm sure, about UNHCR, who try to maintain the independence of humanitarianism, but the outcome is not independent at all. And there is a huge drama happening which is affecting perhaps 4 million people. So when I say that humanitarianism is become more contextual, I'm also talking about real politics of humanitarianism. I'm not talking just about something like, localization, how we can have more people involved in the extension of humanitarian assistance, but also on how contextual politics increasingly, or maybe not increasingly, maybe it's always been like that, but we have to really focus on this, on how those in different contexts things are happening that may run very much counter to the idea of humanitarianism. But not everywhere. So in other places it will be different stories to tell, and there will be more space for humanitarianism. So that's why I keep saying it's the context. I'm not going to tell you that it's everywhere as bad as here or everywhere as bad as there. It's the context that matters. What I find positive about a contextual approach is that, to my mind, we have been talking a lot about reform of the humanitarian sector, and not always equally successful. There is this feeling that there is a kind of ongoing inertia where the more things change in the international humanitarian sector, the least they change, because what stays is the kind of mental set or attitude where the humanitarian system is a very hierarchical and in many ways exclusive type of system, and it seems very difficult to break through that. So what might be possible if we look more and focus more on context, we might actually argue that reform should not just happen at the international, but could perhaps happen much better in those contexts. So having a contextual approach where you can seek actors together who are from a particular context, understand better what is going on in their context with humanitarian governance and what should be done and what can be done in advocacy, could be a very fruitful approach. One of the aspects we are taking in this is the formation of humanitarian observatories. So in those 3 countries, but also increasingly other countries, we have in South Asia, in the Philippines, others are forming, there are groups of people who are from different backgrounds. So there are academics, humanitarians, international humanitarians, but all nationals, almost all nationals, but working for international agencies or for national agencies, coming together once in a while to talk about humanitarian governance in their context, trying to make some changes, trying to see what can be done, anyway, I'm here implicitly advertising another roundtable we have about humanitarian observatories. In case you're interested, you can find it in your program. Now, I am the president at the moment of the International Humanitarian Studies Association, but this is not anymore. After Wednesday, I will not be the president anymore of the International Humanitarian Association. We have elections going on. You can still vote. Don't forget, until tomorrow night, you can still vote both for the president and for the board members. And so I will be departing. And I thought it would be nice to have a departing gift to the IHSA. And it's one of those gifts that you can choose to unwrap or not. You can also use the gift and put it down into a little, cabinet, never to look at it again. It's up to you, really. But I thought my gift, departing gift to IHSA, would be a different definition of what is humanitarian studies. We have a definition on our website which started already in 2009. I think that definition was made, and it's a bit old, and people, we don't look at it very often. But I'm rather passionate about something, and that is that from the beginning of the association, we already had this idea that our association is not about humanitarian action, and very much is not about just international humanitarian action. If that would be your view on humanitarian studies, it is almost like you have you are interested in health, and you only focus on the remedy, the medication, without asking yourself, what is the disease, who are the patients, what is going on. So that would be a very narrow way of defining humanitarian studies. Now what I've seen is that the definition of humanitarian studies, because in those days most people would say it's about international humanitarian action. We've been saying from the beginning in the association, no, let's focus on the humanitarian crisis and what is going on around it. So what I feel increasingly so, if we keep defining humanitarian studies as something that originates around humanitarian action, we will stay too much into the confines of the thinking of international humanitarian action. So I thought we'd turn the tables around. So my definition of humanitarian studies that I now increasingly work with, and what I would like to give to IHSA as my departing gift as a president, for you to take or not to take, that's what happens with gifts, is humanitarian studies is the study of societies and vulnerable communities experiencing humanitarian crisis originating from disaster, conflict, refugee situations and or political collapse. It studies the causes and impact of crisis, how people, communities and authorities respond to them, including efforts for prevention and preparedness, how humanitarian action and other external interventions are organized and affect the recovery from crisis, and the institutional changes that crisis and crisis response engender. So this definition puts humanitarian action a little bit to the side. It starts from society. What is happening when there is a crisis? How do people react? Households, communities, how do their authorities react? And then, of course, there might be international humanitarian action. And we study it, and we study it critically. But it's not the starting point of what, for me, constitutes humanitarian studies. And just to focus on the last bit, institutional changes. That is a very rich field of research that I think we can focus more on. What is happening in crisis with institutions. And there has been a lot of work around gender, for example. Gender relations tend to change in times of humanitarian crisis. But what type of changes? How lasting are they? Are they changes for everyone or just for a certain elite and not for others? What happens when the humanitarian crisis is over? Are the changes undone or are they continuing? Well, undone is a funny word for a sociologist like me. Are they, being undone by some mix of dynamics, or are they lasting forever? So it's very interesting to see what is happening with institutions in times of crisis. I think, yeah. So finally, I was also thinking, like, what unites us? I mean, what is there to unite those different humanitarianisms? And to some extent, of course, for a long time we were thinking, yes, but the principle of humanity could fold in many of those other ethics, because isn't that still the basis, that we think that it's a desire to prevent and alleviate human suffering wherever it may be found, to protect life and health, and to ensure respect for the human being, which is very much connected, of course, to Henri Dunant and the origins of the Red Cross community. However, the definition of humanity has evolved beyond Henri Dunant. And for me, I still take a lot of inspiration from it. Even when I study other types of humanitarianism, I still take a lot of inspiration from the idea of humanity, but more in how it evolved. And there is one parting sheet I would like to share with you. And that is another question about what is humanity. But then this comes from the Magic Mountain. Can I have the next sheet? Yeah. So there it is said. I found this when I was walking in Switzerland. There's this highway which is dedicated to that book, and where you have the some quotes from the book in that snowy landscape, so it even makes a bigger impression on you. But I take a lot of inspiration from it. It says, what then is humanism? It is the love of humanity, nothing else. And therefore it is political. And therefore it is rebellion against everything that tarnishes and devalues humanity. And this is, I feel, a value that unites us in this room, that could unite people engaging in humanitarian studies, and also compels us to stand by affected communities. To stand by affected communities, whether when, they are victimized through international humanitarian law breaches, when they're victimized because humanitarianism doesn't deliver in the way it should, for reasons it may or may not be able to influence. And it should be a constant motivation to keep thinking and engaging with what is happening, because that is one of the things that I so much like about humanitarian studies, humanitarian scholars. We very rarely find pure scholars who just sit in their university, but we're all engaging in change and making things better. So that's how this view on humanity, this definition of humanity is for me a very strong source of inspiration for the work we do, and I hope for this conference. Thank you very much. I hope I wasn't speaking too low. I didn't put my...
Thank you very much, Dorothy, for a very thought-provoking, little bit unconventional kind of a keynote, and I'm so happy by listening that she talked about contextualization of the humanitarian studies and also the humanitarian governance, which is so important. So it's no more isolated. So we need to also understand both the political context, social context, and also the governance part. And I'm sure that the scholars sitting in this room and practitioners in the next 3 days, they will be looking into that part of the politicization of humanitarian activities from the different host countries where these actions have been happening, but also from the international arenas where the debates are coming, the role of international agencies, global governance structure, and whether even, if I use that term also, that whether aid and humanitarian assistance are being weaponized for the political, geopolitical purposes of the big powers, global powers, regional powers. So I'm sure that this is a very good starting with this keynote, that next 3 days we will have lots of discussion, debates on these issues. Now I'd like to invite our second keynote speaker, Professor Mizan Khan, Deputy Director of ICAT. Let me introduce a little bit about him. Professor Mizan is also the technical lead of the LDC University's Consortium on Climate Change, which is an official program for capacity building of the LDCs. He attends climate negotiations as a lead negotiator with the Bangladesh delegation since 2001. He is a lead author of the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Professor Khan has a wide range of publication in peer-reviewed journals, including in Nature and Science. He has to his credit a number of books on climate change economics, politics, capacity building, published by Routledge and MIT Press. So please, Professor Khan.
Thank you, Dr. Tawfiq, Professor Tawfiq, for inviting me here today at very short notice. And I graciously agreed, though just barely a week, last Sunday, we had to have our leader laid to rest eternally. So I couldn't pull myself together, at least emotionally. And when I got the invitation, I couldn't keep your request to write something as the keynote speaker, but I tried to write something on Professor Selim, who was my leader, a visionary climate change leader worldwide, because when I speak about him after his death, I get choked. That is why I wanted to scribble my thoughts about him. So, today's obituary, a short one, I titled as Remembering Professor Salim-ul-Haq, a resounding heartbeat of the climate world. I had the professional interaction with Professor Haq for the last quarter of a century when I got back from America with my PhD in 1998. Then I was serving at UNDP, but NSU offered me to join as chairman of the Department of Environmental Science and Management. Then in 2003, in July, I joined NSU. But just in a month after my joining, Professor Haq, then Dr. Haq, was serving at the International Institute for Climate Change and Development in London, and he invited me to, with a 2-week fellowship, to come to IIED and to go to University of East Anglia in Norwich to present a joint paper, which was published later in a book. And then during those days, he shared with me about his plan to come back to Dhaka and establish a center like this, International Center for Climate Change and Development. And then you all know, finally, he got back in 2008 and established this center at the International IUB, International University. Okay. And since 2003, you can Google our names, and we had innumerable joint publications, in most of which I am the lead author, but he is the co-author, because he didn't have, in his later years, he didn't have much time to kind of invest more time for writing. Because he was a global leader, so he only used to play with his telephone to have global partnership. And he was the fastest responder on earth, I can guarantee. Being such a person, he was the fastest responder on earth in his emails. He requested everybody that don't send me long emails, and I will write just few words or just a sentence, because I don't have time to. So with these words, let me share a little of his thoughts about him. So beyond the countless laurels, including the latest as being the most influential climate expert designated by Nature, very famous premier scientific journal, you know, as the most influential scientist on climate change. Okay, 10 scientists were designated, but on climate change, he was the number one. And then the advisor to the COP28 presidency to be hosted in Dubai, he was designated, and he was supposed to leave on 29th, last Sunday, to attend the advisory board meeting in Dubai. But then he was laid to rest that very same day. That was painful. And then his last designation was at the advisor on climate change by the UN Secretary General. Okay. So I don't want to harp on this. I just want to tease out the soul and values that Professor Salim-ul-Haq held. Salim was a compassionate soul who understood the human dimension of climate change to its core. His empathy for those most affected by increasingly extreme climate disasters fueled the determination to find solutions through his relentless fight for realizing community-based and locally led adaptation, loss and damage, and capacity building to address climate change. You all know the word Gabeshona. He is the person who introduced this Bangla word Gabeshona globally, which means research. So he established Gabeshona first nationally as a research platform, and now it has become a global online event for 7 days, 24 hours, covering all the 3 major time zones in the world, where during the 7 days about 100 sessions were held, and this year also in March we will be organizing this online. Okay. And then, as a kind of respect to his soul, we, the civil society organizations globally, have initiated a petition to name the Loss and Damage Fund that has been agreed at COP27 last year in Sharm el-Sheikh after his name. Please pray for our success in that. Okay. However, today I want to share not about the laurels, as I mentioned, or his actions. This is about teasing out his inherent soul and values. Selim was an inspiring visionary with unbelievable clarity in his messaging to ensure climate justice, so dearly held by him. In the vast expanse of our shared struggle against climate chaos, he was an irreplaceable force, a resounding heartbeat in the symphony of climate science, policy, and advocacy. In the realm of climate change, where the stakes are so high as the Himalayas and the challenges are as vast as the oceans, Selim stood tall as a beacon, as a luminary. One of the defining aspects of his legacy was his uncanny ability to bridge science and policy. His presence and voice reverberated from the halls of UN climate negotiations to remote villages, particularly in South Asia and the LDC countries in Africa, facing the brunt of climate change. In the vast tapestry of international climate negotiations, Selim stood as a voice for the voiceless. Selim was a pioneer. Selim was a pioneer of initiating learning events and institutions. The LDC University's Consortium on Climate Change, what we call LUCCC, an official program of the 46 LDC governments, for which I have the privilege of serving as the technical lead for the last 5 years, carries his legacy of capacity building initiative. Dr. Huq was more than a mentor. He was the steady hand guiding the youth community through the tapestry of unprecedented climate change. His eyes, lit with the fires of passion, ignited flames in those young hearts. It is impossible to recall his infectious enthusiasm without feeling the weight of responsibility he placed on our shoulders. The responsibility to protect, to fight, and to ensure climate justice. His smile, a radiant constant, even in the face of daunting climate projections, spoke volumes. It was a smile that reflected a profound belief in our capacity to make a difference, to heal the wounds we have inflicted upon our earth. Selim's short statements, he always spoken with few lines, few paragraphs just, not a long speaker, sounded like a melody that watered the rusting lips and crushed waves. as an ode to the beauty of our planet and a lament for the scars that we have been continuing to live upon. As we bid farewell to his giant of climate world, who personified endless humility as one of the finest gentlemen I have ever met in my life, our tears continue to flow, a testament to the profound impact he had on our lives. Let each eye drop be a drop of water for the purged lands he fought to restore. His departure leaves an ache, a rawness, but within that pain lies the fuel for the fire he ignited, a fire that refuses to be extinguished. Dr. Huck, your absence is felt like an endless void, but your legacy is a flame that will forever burn. In the hearts of millions, you inspired. As we navigate the uncertain future, may we honor you not only with words, but with a commitment to turning the tides of climate change. Rest in peace and power. Your impact lives on Salim Bhai, as most of our generation used to call him. Bhai means brother in Bangla. Okay. Though you are no longer with us physically, but you will remain a resounding voice for this world, a voice that will echo through the air for eons. Let us remember him together and carry forward his legacy as a rare person attending all the 27 COPs held so far. But he always attended not as a government delegation with government batch like me. He always stayed outside as a CSO, global CSO leader, but he molded the negotiations inside the official talks. We assure you that each and every participant for the upcoming COP28 in Dubai will be Salim's mobile office to carry forward your flag. Because he used to every day sit on a table, and on that table there was this flag, Salim's mobile office, because he was a magnate, to the global climate change practitioners, activists, as well as negotiators. Let me finish my sense of irreparable loss with few lines from the poem On the Death of the Beloved by John O'Donoghue. When orchids brighten the heart, darkest winter has turned to spring. May this dark grief flower with hope in every heart that loves you. Thank you very much. Now, let me share a few thoughts as the keynote speaker on the topic. I don't know. On the topic, just example. I will not take much time. How much time I can take for this? 3 minutes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I don't take that because that was my main. Okay. So just, as I mentioned, I will go a little supersonic. Okay. As I mentioned, Salim's darling themes were 3. Adaptation. He was a lead author, a CLA. I myself also served as the lead author in 2 reports. Then locally led adaptation, because locally led adaptation is the solution. Okay, centralized adaptation management is not working, as IPCC AR6 has mentioned. And then his second topic of darling topic was loss and damage, which he fought for the last 15 years. He was the voice on loss and damage. That is why we are trying to initiate the fund in his name. if possible, globally. And then capacity building, because capacity building is the solution, okay, for addressing climate change. Now, let me mention Article 8 of the Paris Agreement, which had this article on loss and damage. And para 3 of the article mentions the theory of loss and damage as to avert, minimize, and address loss and damage, where we meet humanitarianism. I enjoyed very much the capacious framing of Professor Dorothy that he expanded of humanitarianism. Now, we can avert loss and damage through mitigation. And in the convention, you all know that mitigation was the forethought. Adaptation was just the afterthought. Even no article was dedicated in the convention on adaptation. Just 5 words on adaptation have been mentioned, because then mitigation, and for right reasons, was thought to be the solution. And still mitigation is the solution. But then gradually, after publication of the 3rd assessment and 4th assessment reports, then adaptation came to the fore for 3 reasons. One is mitigation was not done by the developed countries. The major emitters, now developing country, few are also the major emitters we know. And then adaptation, climate justice movement was increasing because of the extreme climate change events. And now let me come to the second theory of this Article 8.3. Minimizing loss and damage we can do through adaptation. But as a climate finance negotiator focusing on adaptation finance, you all know that it is extremely very poor. Extremely very poor. Just 1/5 of the whole climate finance, which we could not still reach the pledged $100 billion that pledged on back in 2010, is still 1/5. Only about, in real sense, as net adaptation finance, $5 to $6 billion we get for the whole world. But for the LDCs, it's less than $5 per head. So adaptation we are not doing. And as days, months, years pass by, adaptation cost is going to mount and mount, because extreme events have become the new normal. Now the last theory of that article, addressing loss and damage. Here we meet with humanitarian actions. But Dorothy has expanded the concept of humanitarianism. Okay, now while addressing humanitarianism, the earlier version, as she mentioned, was ex post response, okay, to an event after, okay. So response, recovery, and rehabilitation, all those. But because of climate change and because of the Sendai framework, where 4 priority areas are there about understanding the risk, about strengthening risk governance, there is a shift in the humanitarian paradigm from responding ex post to responding a priori, ex ante. And that is why we now have the models of forecast-based financing, even doling out cash to the poor communities for taking actions. And now, in loss and damage also, in addressing earlier, rapid onset events have been responded to, because they figure in CNN, BBC, or Al Jazeera News. But slow onset events like the sea level rise, thawing of permafrost, or destruction of biodiversity on which community livelihoods depended on and continue to depend on, they were not taken care of. But over time, research showed that slow onset events kill more people than the rapid onset events. And rapid onset events could also be taken care of by either insurance or international assistance. So we need to now change this paradigm, because insurance will not work for slow onset events because their probability is known. Insurance does respond only to events where we don't know the probability. Okay. Now that is the reason. And then coming to that kind of slow onset events about Bangladesh. Bangladesh has been regarded and is regarded as a model of disaster management, and now increasingly, in the words of former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, that Bangladesh is the capital of adaptation. And Professor Salimul Haq, all through his writings, Every week he writes a column in the Daily Star and also globally. He projected Bangladesh in a very positive manner as the adaptation capital of Dhaka. And where we are running short of resources, for example, over 85% of total investment for addressing climate action comes from domestic sources, but we get peanuts from the international sources. Now, in Bangladesh, we have a serious problem of increasing displacement. Now, we have a number of vulnerable hotspots, particularly in our southern coastal belt, and projections tell that by 2030 or 2050, more than 20 million people will be displaced. And this is kind of a slow onset event, which we don't solve. So Professor Salimul Haq, initiated a model, climate resilient, migrant friendly towns. For the last few years, we have been working in partnership with BRAC, and in the Science magazine that we have written an opinion post in their policy forum, where we have advocated also a model of selective relocation abroad, not wholesale migration, but taking one or two youths from each and every family of the vulnerable hotspots. If we can initiate training, give them training in jointly supported institutions in Dhaka, learning the language of the industrial countries, because they are running short of young, able-bodied, agile labor force, and because of their aging, whatever political rhetorics are there in those countries, they will need young labor force, skilled labor force. So if we can do that, then at least even not with citizenship, on temporary migration, circular migration, those young people from those families can move to those industrial countries like Britain, France, or Germany. They can work for 5 years, and this is a win-win option for both countries. And we are doing a serious research on this based on data. So thank you very much, because the whip, Professor Tawfiq, is standing behind me. So I'm sorry I took more time than I was allocated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry that because we have back-to-back sessions in between, so we'll very quickly have a kind of some information from Marlos before we end. Yeah.
Hi everyone. I'll keep it quick because we're really went over time. My name is Marloes. I'm the event manager. I probably talked to many of you over email, so it's really nice to see everyone face by face. So I'd like to thank my colleague Mira Swab. She's running around somewhere, who's been helping me greatly, and my Manuel Khan is also not here. My organizers. I'm going to go through some things real quick. So we have some online sessions. If you go to your room, 15 minutes before you can start logging in. There's IT staff there all the time to help you out with anything with the setup. There's student volunteers walking around to show you to the rooms. The rooms are all a bit spread out. It's a big building and it's spread out all over the buildings. You have a map, but don't shy away. Just ask the students. They will guide you to all of the rooms. I won't be monitoring my email so much, so if you want a direct answer on one of your questions, go to the live chat. There's people answering the live chat on the website. It's not a bot, it's actual colleagues answering your questions. If you have any other questions, there's a folder with participant info, manuals on anything you might need. Let me see if I'm missing anything. Oh yeah, so we're going to be recording all the sessions. I think I've emailed this already, but if you don't want your session recorded, let me know. There's also a videographer and a photographer walking around. If you don't want your pictures published or shared with anybody else, also send me an email, and I'll make sure that they won't be shared. Tomorrow we have a conference dinner. You're all invited to join us. The dinner will take place here in the venue. Apologies about your name badges. They're going to be ready right now at the session, the photo session. Yeah, so we're going to take a quick photo. There's a snack there for you and a drink, and then we can walk to the panel sessions at 11. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we finish, please just hold a minute. We will have a also cultural program before dinner tomorrow. Please don't miss the dinner, because this will be a very interesting cultural program by our students. And we will have now all will go to the downstairs for a photo session and with quick coffee and snacks, and you can take those and go to your session. Before that, I would like to hand over token of appreciation to our keynote speakers. So first to Professor Mizan. So please, you use the lifts from left side and right side because probably there are too many people. And go downstairs in front of library. There we will have a formal photo session. Thank you very much.